They called me lazy, irresponsible, and a disappointment for 28 years. Then I sent one text message to our family group chat that changed everything forever. Won the lottery. $47 million. Within minutes, my phone exploded with messages begging me to share the wealth. So I did exactly what they deserved and blocked every single number. Subscribe if you believe karma always finds a way. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as I stared at my phone screen, reading the same lottery numbers over and over again. March 15th, 2024, the day that would split my life into before and after. My hands trembled as I checked the winning numbers against my ticket for the 7th time. Same result. Same impossible reality. $47 million after taxes. I sat in my beat-up Ford pickup truck outside the QuikTrip on Indian School Road, the same gas station where I'd bought lottery tickets every Wednesday for 3 years. The same numbers every time. My family's birthdays arranged in order. Mom's birthday, Dad's, Sofia's, Diego's, even Aunt Carmen's. Numbers that represented the people who'd spent decades telling me I'd never amount to anything. The irony wasn't lost on me. The family that had written me off had unknowingly provided the combination to my financial freedom. I laughed, a sound that echoed hollow in the empty truck cab. 28 years old. High school diploma. Construction worker with calloused hands and a reputation for being the Rivera family screw-up. That's how they saw me. That's how they'd always seen me. My phone buzzed, a text from Sofia in our family group chat. "Hey Marcus, you missed Sunday dinner again? Mom's worried you can't afford groceries. I can send you some money if you need it." The condescending tone that had followed me my entire life. Poor Marcus, can't keep a steady job, dropped out of community college. Still lives in that terrible apartment on 27th Avenue. If only they knew. If only they could see the truth I'd been hiding for 3 years. I drove home, but not to the studio apartment they thought I lived in. That place was just a prop, a carefully maintained illusion. $50 a month to keep the lease, basic furniture from thrift stores, clothes scattered around to make it look lived in. A perfect stage for the role I'd been playing. Instead, I headed north to Scottsdale, to the penthouse that overlooked Camelback Mountain, the one I'd purchased with cash 2 years ago. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor gave me time to think. 3 years ago, I'd started playing those numbers after another humiliating family dinner where Uncle Miguel announced his auto shop was expanding while Dad shook his head at me across the table. "Marcus needs to find direction," he said, as if I wasn't sitting right there. 25 years old and still figuring things out? That night, I decided to buy my first lottery ticket. Not because I believed I'd win, but because I needed something, anything, that might change my trajectory. For 2.5 years, nothing. Then, 6 months ago, everything shifted. Not with the lottery, but with something else entirely. I'd been working construction on a new development project when the foreman, Jake Sullivan, pulled me aside. "Rivera, you've got an eye for detail, and you're smart as hell. Why are you wasting your time here?" That conversation led to an opportunity I'd never seen coming. Jake had connections in real estate development, people who needed someone trustworthy to help them identify undervalued properties. Within 3 months, I'd earned enough in finder's fees to put a down payment on a duplex. I renovated it myself, working nights and weekends, then sold it for triple what I paid. The profit rolled into 2 more properties, then 5, then a small commercial building, all while my family thought I was struggling to make rent. The secret felt powerful. Every Sunday dinner where they offered to help with my bills, every birthday where Sofia would slip me $50 with a pitying smile, every conversation where they spoke about me in third person as if I couldn't hear them. I absorbed it all, storing their words like fuel for something I couldn't yet name. But today was different. Today, the lottery ticket in my wallet represented something bigger than real estate profits or construction wages. Today represented a choice. I could keep living the lie, accepting their pity while secretly building wealth, or I could show them exactly who Marcus Rivera really was. I opened the sliding glass door to my balcony and looked out over the valley. Phoenix sprawled below me, a grid of lights beginning to twinkle as dusk approached. Somewhere down there, my family was probably sitting around Mom's kitchen table, talking about their days, their successes, their plans, and probably wondering when Marcus would finally get his act together. My phone buzzed again, another message in our family group chat. This time from Diego. Hey everyone, just got accepted to graduate school at ASU. Full scholarship for my master's in engineering. The congratulations started flowing immediately. Dad typing in all caps about how proud he was, Mom sending heart emojis, Sofia promising to take him out for a celebration dinner. I stared at the screen, remembering my own acceptance letter to ASU's business program 5 years ago, the one I'd shown them excitedly at Sunday dinner, only to watch Dad's face fall. Marcus, you barely made it through community college. Maybe you should stick with trades. Mom had nodded agreement. College isn't for everyone, mijo. There's no shame in blue-collar work. The shame wasn't in blue-collar work. The shame was in their assumption that I wasn't capable of more. The shame was in their immediate dismissal of my potential, their inability to see beyond the mistakes I'd made as a teenager. I'd withdrawn my application the next day, convincing myself they were right. But they weren't right. The real estate success proved that. The construction skills that let me renovate properties proved that. The financial discipline that had let me save and invest proved that. I wasn't the failure they thought I was. I was just operating in a different arena than they understood. The lottery ticket felt warm in my back pocket. $47 million. More money than my entire extended family would earn in their combined lifetimes. Enough to change everything, to reveal everything, to turn their world upside down the way they turned mine upside down for 28 years. I walked to my home office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a desk that cost more than most people's cars. On the wall hung the deed to my first property purchase, framed like a diploma. Next to it, a photo of...
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Construction crew from my current job site. Good people who respected my work ethic and treated me as an equal, not a charity case. Opening my laptop, I checked my investment accounts. Real estate portfolio worth $2.3 million. Stock investments worth $400,000. Cash reserves worth $600,000. In 3 years of secret financial building, I'd accumulated more wealth than anyone in my family imagined possible. And now, with the lottery win, I'd crossed into territory they couldn't ignore or dismiss. $47 million demanded respect. $47 million commanded attention. $47 million would force them to see me differently, whether they wanted to or not. My phone rang. Sofia's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her message. Marcus, I was thinking about what I said earlier. Maybe instead of sending money, I could come help you organize your finances. I know money management isn't your strong suit, and I've got some experience with budgeting from my marketing job. Money management isn't my strong suit. I almost laughed. If she only knew about the spreadsheets on my computer, the investment tracking, the property management files, the tax planning documents. If she only knew that while she was struggling to save for a down payment on her first house, I owned 4 properties outright. But she didn't know. None of them knew. Because I'd made a decision 3 years ago to let them keep believing their story about me. Every family gathering where they talked around me instead of to me. Every holiday where they exchanged updates about their careers while assuming I had nothing valuable to contribute. Every birthday where they gave me practical gifts, like work clothes and grocery store gift cards, as if I couldn't afford necessities. I'd played the role perfectly. Showing up in my work clothes, driving the old pickup truck, living in the cheap apartment they expected me to live in, letting them pay for dinner sometimes, accepting their hand-me-down furniture, nodding politely when they offered unsolicited advice about my life choices. The performance had become so natural that sometimes I almost forgot it was a performance. Almost forgot that I had choices they couldn't imagine, opportunities they wouldn't recognize, resources they'd never believe existed. Tonight, that performance would end. Tonight, I would send one simple text message that would shatter their assumptions and force them to confront the truth they'd been blind to for years. The truth that the family disappointment had been quietly succeeding while they weren't paying attention.
The lottery ticket represented more than money. It represented vindication, validation, and the end of a lie that had protected me, but also imprisoned me. For 3 years, I'd hidden my success to avoid their judgment, their attempts to control or diminish what I'd built. But $47 million was impossible to hide, impossible to dismiss, impossible to explain away. I picked up my phone and opened the family group chat. 8 family members, all online, all probably discussing Diego's graduate school acceptance and planning their next gathering, all assuming that Marcus would show up in his work boots, grateful for whatever scraps of inclusion they offered. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Once I sent this message, everything would change. The secret would be out, the performance would be over, the family dynamics that had shaped my entire adult life would shift permanently. But I was ready. I'd been ready for 3 years, building toward this moment without even knowing it. Every property purchase, every investment decision, every night spent working on renovations while they thought I was watching television in my cheap apartment, it had all been preparation for this revelation. The message was simple, direct, impossible to misinterpret. Won the lottery, $47 million. I hit send and watched the 3 dots appear immediately as someone started typing. Then another someone, then another. The group chat exploded into activity as my phone buzzed with message after message, each notification like a small explosion of the life I'd been living. Within 5 minutes, everything had changed. The family disappointment had become the family lottery winner. And now I would discover exactly who they really were when money was involved.
Blessings. Family takes care of family. We've always been there for you when you needed help. Always been there for me when I needed help? I set the phone down and walked to my kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water from the built-in filtration system that cost more than the monthly rent at my fake apartment. Mom's words echoed in my head as I looked around my real home, the penthouse they'd never seen, filled with furniture they'd never imagined me owning. When exactly had they been there for me? When I'd asked for help with my college application and Dad had discouraged me from even trying? When I'd suggested starting a small contracting business and Uncle Miguel had laughed, saying I didn't have the business sense? When I'd mentioned wanting to learn about investing and Sofia had patted my head like I was a child, saying that was above my pay grade? My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Marcus, this is Tom Hendricks from Channel 12 News. We'd love to interview you about your lottery win. Can you call me? Someone had leaked it to the media already. I scrolled through the group chat, looking for clues, and found it. Carmen had shared a screenshot of my message to her real estate group chat with the caption, "My nephew just won the lottery. Arizona has another millionaire." The phone rang again. This time, it was a number with a California area code. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. "Mr. Rivera, this is Jennifer Walsh from Wealth Management Associates. Congratulations on your lottery win. We specialize in helping lottery winners preserve and grow their wealth. I'd love to schedule a consultation." The secret was already spreading beyond my family. Within hours, my name would be public record. The Arizona Lottery Corporation would want to do their publicity photos. The media would dig into my background. My carefully maintained double life was about to become impossible to sustain. I walked to my bedroom and opened the walk-in closet that was larger than my entire fake apartment. Designer clothes hung next to work shirts, Italian leather shoes next to steel-toed boots. The visual representation of the 2 lives I'd been living about to collide in spectacular fashion. Another voice note from the family chat, this time from Dad. His voice was serious, paternal, the tone he used when he was about to give advice, whether you wanted it or not. "Marcus, I've been thinking about this, and you need to understand that sudden wealth can be dangerous. People will come out of nowhere trying to take advantage of you. You're going to need guidance from people who care about you, people who knew you before the money. Family is the only thing you can trust in this situation." Family is the only thing you can trust? I almost choked on my water. These were the same people who'd spent 3 years assuming I couldn't afford basic necessities while I was quietly building a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. The same people who'd never once asked me about my goals, my plans, or my dreams without immediately explaining why they weren't realistic. Sofia had started a separate group chat without me, but Diego screenshotted one of the messages and sent it to the main chat. Guys, we need to be strategic about this. Marcus is going to need serious help managing this money, and honestly, none of us want to see him wasted. We should present a united front about getting proper financial management in place. A united front, as if I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be celebrated. As if $47 million was too much responsibility for someone like me to handle alone. As if 3 years of their condescending advice qualified them to make decisions about my financial future. The irony was suffocating. While they were forming strategies to protect me from my own supposed incompetence, I was sitting in a home I'd purchased with cash, surrounded by investment statements they couldn't imagine me understanding, having built wealth through methods they'd never given me credit for knowing existed. My phone buzzed with another call, this time from a blocked number. I answered out of curiosity. Marcus Rivera? Yeah, that's me. This is Sandra Mitchell from the Arizona Lottery Corporation. Congratulations on your win. We need to schedule your prize claim appointment and discuss the publicity requirements. Publicity requirements? My stomach dropped. What kind of publicity? Standard lottery winner photos, press conference if you're willing, and your name and city of residence become public record. It's Arizona state law. We can discuss the details when you come in to claim your prize. After I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the bedroom's floor-to-ceiling mirror. In a few days, my name would be on billboards and news websites. Marcus Rivera, lottery winner from Phoenix, Arizona, the construction worker who'd hit it big. The narrative would write itself, and it would be completely wrong. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the public story didn't matter as much as the private reckoning that was about to happen with my family. They thought they knew me, thought they understood my capabilities and limitations. The lottery win was about to force them to confront how wrong they'd been about everything. Another notification pulled me back to the group chat. Uncle Miguel had sent a long voice note, his tone warm and familiar. Marcus, I'm so proud of you, mijo. You know, I've been thinking about expanding the auto shop, maybe opening a second location. With your blessing, I think we could really build something together. You'd be a silent partner, of course, but the returns could be incredible. Family business, you know, something to think about. Family business? He'd never once invited me to be part of his existing business, never asked for my input or opinions, never treated me as someone capable of contributing to a business venture. But now, with lottery money in play, suddenly I was partner material. The messages kept coming, each one more transparent than the last. Aunt Carmen sharing links to luxury real estate listings, suggesting we could invest together in some beach properties. Sofia forwarding articles about lottery winners who'd lost everything due to poor financial decisions, with the subtext that she needed to save me from myself. Diego sending screenshots of his student loan balances with crying laughing emojis as if his debt was somehow my responsibility to solve. But it was Mom's latest message that cut deepest. A long paragraph in her careful English, the kind she used when she was trying to be serious and formal. Marcus, I have been thinking about this all day, and I want you to know that your father and I are worried, not about the money, but about you. You have always been our generous boy, always wanting to help others, sometimes too much. People are going to ask you for things now, and you are going to want to say yes, because that is who you are. But you need to be smart. You need to protect yourself. That is why you need family involved in these decisions. We love you too much to let you make mistakes that could hurt you. Generous boy, always wanting to help others, sometimes too much. She was rewriting history in real time, turning my past struggles into evidence of my naive generosity, rather than acknowledging the reality that I'd been struggling because they'd convinced me I wasn't capable of more. I'd never been particularly generous with money because I'd never had money to be generous with. What she was remembering as generosity was actually desperation.
Times I'd offered to help with family events or expenses were times I'd been trying to prove my worth, to show that I could contribute something valuable, even if they didn't respect my career choices. But now they were painting that desperation as a character flaw that needed to be managed. My supposed tendency to give too much was why I needed their oversight and protection. The narrative was perfect. They could control my money while convincing themselves and me that it was for my own good. I poured myself a glass of wine from a bottle that cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month and sat on my balcony overlooking the city lights. Somewhere down there, my family was probably gathering for an emergency meeting, discussing strategies for handling Marcus and his dangerous windfall. They had no idea that I'd been handling money just fine without their input for 3 years. They had no idea that I'd made more financial decisions in the past year than they'd made in their entire lives. They had no idea that while they were worried about my ability to manage $47 million, I'd already proven I could turn small investments into significant returns. The phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized. Jake Sullivan, my foreman from the construction site and the man who'd first opened my eyes to real estate opportunities. "Marcus, you son of a bitch!" Jake's voice was filled with genuine excitement. "I just heard from Tommy at the supply yard. Says you won the lottery? Tell me that's true." "It's true, Jake. $47 million after taxes." "Holy shit, man, that's incredible." "You know what this means?" I waited for him to tell me what I should do with the money, how I should invest it, why I needed to be careful. Instead, he surprised me. "This means you can finally tell your family to go to hell and stop pretending you're broke." My wine glass stopped halfway to my lips. "What?" "Come on, Marcus. You think I don't know about your real estate portfolio? You think I don't notice that you drive a beater truck to work but somehow always have cash for investment opportunities? You think I don't see the calluses on your hands from renovation work you're supposedly too broke to be doing?" I was silent, processing the fact that Jake had seen through my performance when my own family hadn't. "I've known for 2 years that you've got money put away. Good for you, keeping it quiet. But now with this lottery thing, you don't have to keep playing poor anymore. That's gotta feel pretty good." It did feel good. It felt terrifying and liberating and overwhelming all at once. For 3 years, I'd been living a double life, and now the walls between those lives were crumbling whether I was ready or not. "Jake, my family thinks I need their help managing this money. They think I'm going to waste it or get taken advantage of." Jake laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Your family thinks a lot of things about you that aren't true, Marcus. Question is, are you going to keep letting them think those things, or are you finally going to show them who you really are?" After I hung up with Jake, I sat in the gathering darkness, looking out over Phoenix and thinking about his question. For 3 years, I'd maintained my cover story because it was easier than dealing with their reactions to my success. Easier than fielding their questions, their advice, their attempts to insert themselves into my financial decisions. But the lottery win had taken that choice away from me. In a few days, I'd be a public figure. The media would dig into my background, interview my coworkers, maybe even visit my properties. The truth about my real estate investments would come out whether I wanted it to or not. The question wasn't whether my family would discover my deception. The question was how I was going to handle the conversation when they did. How I was going to explain 3 years of lies, 3 years of accepting their pity and charity while secretly building wealth they couldn't imagine. How I was going to tell them that the irresponsible family disappointment they'd been worried about was actually more financially sophisticated than any of them had ever been. My phone buzzed with another message from the family chat. This time it was a group message from Dad, Mom, Sofia, and Carmen together. "Marcus, we've been talking, and we think it would be best if you came over tomorrow night for dinner so we can all discuss this situation as a family. There are a lot of important decisions that need to be made quickly, and you're going to need support and guidance through this process. We love you and want to make sure you're protected." Protected? From what? From making my own decisions? From handling my own money without their constant supervision and judgment?
I started typing a response, then deleted it. Started again, then deleted it again. What I wanted to say would burn bridges that might be impossible to rebuild. What they expected me to say would trap me in the same dynamic that had defined our relationship for 28 years. Instead, I simply typed, "I'll think about it." The response was immediate and predictable. "Sofia, Marcus, this isn't something to think about. This is urgent." "Mom, mijo, please don't shut us out. We are your family." "Dad, son, pride goes before a fall. Don't let this money make you think you don't need family anymore." Don't let this money make you think you don't need family anymore. As if money was the issue, as if their concern was about my relationship with them rather than their relationship with my money. I finished my wine and went inside, walking through the penthouse that represented everything they told me I couldn't achieve. The art on the walls, the furniture, the view, the location itself. All of it purchased with money I'd earned through work they'd never respected and investments they'd never believed I was capable of making. Tomorrow, the lottery officials would call to schedule my prize claim appointment. The media would start asking questions. My coworkers would want to know my plans. My family would demand answers about my future. But tonight, I was still the only person who knew the full truth. Tonight, I could still choose how
To reveal it, when to reveal it, and what to do with the power that came from being the only one who understood what was really happening. The lottery ticket sat on my kitchen counter. $47 million worth of validation and vindication. But looking around my home, I realized I'd already won something much more valuable than money. I'd won the knowledge that I was capable of far more than anyone had ever given me credit for. Now, I just had to decide whether to share that knowledge or let them keep discovering it the hard way, one shocking revelation at a time. The notifications on my phone had slowed down, but I could see that people were still active in the group chat, probably having side conversations about how to handle the Marcus situation, planning their approaches, coordinating their strategies, preparing their arguments for why I needed their help. They had no idea that while they were planning to protect me from myself, I was planning something entirely different, something that would force them to confront every assumption they'd ever made about my intelligence, my competence, and my ability to succeed without their guidance. The game was about to change completely, and I was the only player who knew the real rules. Part 6 to 9, Peak Revelations and Hidden Truths. The Arizona Lottery Corporation offices sat in a gleaming downtown Phoenix high-rise, and as I walked through the marble lobby in my best suit, I felt the weight of what was about to become irreversible. Sandra Mitchell greeted me with a kind of professional enthusiasm reserved for people about to generate significant publicity for her organization. "Mr. Rivera, congratulations again. Are you ready for this?" She gestured toward a conference room where cameras were already being set up, photographers adjusting their equipment, and a small crowd of lottery officials waited with oversized checks and champagne. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, though my mind was elsewhere, calculating exactly how long it would take for these photos to hit social media, for the news stories to spread, for my family to see concrete proof that their assumptions about my life were about to crumble spectacularly. The photo session was surreal. Me holding the giant check, me shaking hands with lottery officials, me smiling for cameras while reporters shouted questions about my plans for the money. "What's the first thing you're going to buy? Will you quit your construction job? How does it feel to go from working class to millionaire overnight?" Working class to millionaire overnight. If they only knew that the transformation had happened 3 years ago, just without the media attention. If they only knew that I'd been living as a millionaire while my family continued treating me like a charity case who needed their spare change and life advice. "I'm still processing it all," I told the reporters, which was true enough. It's definitely going to change some things. That evening, the story hit every local news station. Channel 12 ran it as their lead story, complete with the standard lottery winner narrative. Local construction worker Marcus Rivera struck it rich with a $47 million jackpot. The 28-year-old Phoenix resident says he's still deciding how to handle his newfound wealth. My phone erupted again, but this time it wasn't just family. Coworkers from the construction site, neighbors from my fake apartment building, high school classmates I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone suddenly remembered Marcus Rivera existed, and everyone had an opinion about what I should do with my money. But it was the family group chat that held my attention. The tone had shifted dramatically since the morning. Where yesterday's messages had been frantic and disorganized, today's were calculated and coordinated. They'd clearly had time to discuss strategy.
Sophia sent a link to the news story with the comment, "Marcus, seeing this on TV made it feel real. I've set up an appointment with Peterson Financial Group for Thursday morning. They specialize in sudden wealth management, and they come highly recommended." Mom followed with a voice note, her tone gentle but firm. "Mijo, I saw you on the television and you looked so overwhelmed. That's normal, pero you don't have to handle this alone. We are all here to help you make good decisions." Dad's message was more direct. "Son, I've been researching lottery winner statistics, and the numbers are troubling. 70% of lottery winners go bankrupt within 7 years, most of them because they didn't have proper guidance in the beginning. That's not going to happen to you, not on my watch." 70% go bankrupt. The irony was staggering. While he was researching lottery winner failure rates, I was sitting in a home office reviewing investment portfolios that had consistently outperformed market averages for 3 years. While he was worried about my financial literacy, I was managing properties that generated more passive income than his annual salary. Uncle Miguel's message arrived an hour later, longer and more detailed than his usual text. "Marcus, I've been talking to some business contacts about your situation. There are some incredible opportunities right now in automotive services, especially with electric vehicle conversions. I've got connections with suppliers, potential locations already scouted, and a business plan that could triple your investment in 5 years. We should sit down this week and go over the numbers." Triple my investment in 5 years? I pulled up my real estate portfolio on my laptop and calculated the returns I'd achieved in just the past year. One property purchase and renovation had netted a 400% return in 8 months. Another had generated enough rental income to pay for itself in 2 years while appreciating 30% in value. Uncle Miguel's incredible opportunity was amateur hour compared to what I'd been doing quietly for years. Aunt Carmen's approach was more subtle, but equally transparent. She'd sent a private message outside the group chat. "Marcus, I know everyone is going to have opinions about your money, and that must be overwhelming. I wanted you to know that I'm here if you need someone to talk to who understands the real estate market. I've been in this business for 15 years, and I've seen what smart property investments can do for people. Maybe we could grab coffee this week and I could share some insights. No pressure." No pressure, except that she'd been in the real estate business for 15 years and had never once asked for my insights or opinions, even though I'd been successfully investing in the same market for 3 years. She had never wondered how I could afford to keep upgrading my living situations without a corresponding increase in my supposed income. She had never questioned why someone who is supposedly struggling financially always seemed to have cash available for family emergencies or group gifts. The deluge of advice continued throughout the week. Financial advisors called with prepared pitches about wealth preservation. Investment firms sent glossy brochures about portfolio management. Insurance agents explained the importance of protecting my assets. Everyone had a plan for my money, and everyone was certain that their plan was exactly what I needed. But the most revealing conversation came Friday evening when Sofia called, not texted, and her tone carried the weight of a family intervention. "Marcus, we need to talk seriously about what's happening here. I know you're probably feeling defensive about everyone giving you advice, but this is bigger than your pride. This is about your future, your security, your ability to actually keep this money instead of losing it all."
I'm listening, I said, though I was actually reviewing lease agreements for 2 commercial properties I'd been considering purchasing. I've been doing research on lottery winners, and Marcus, the stories are horrifying. People who had everything and lost it all because they thought they could handle it alone. People who trusted the wrong advisors, made bad investments, got taken advantage of by family and friends. The irony was suffocating. She was warning me about making bad investments while I sat in an office surrounded by documentation of successful investments she didn't know existed. She was cautioning me about trusting the wrong advisors while I'd been making profitable real estate decisions without any advisors for 3 years. What exactly are you suggesting, Sofia? I'm suggesting that we set up a family trust, something that protects the principal while giving you access to the income, something that ensures this money lasts for generations instead of disappearing in a few years because of impulsive decisions. A family trust. The language was careful, protective, loving, but the subtext was clear. They wanted legal control over my money because they didn't trust me to manage it responsibly. They wanted to institutionalize their assumption that I was financially incompetent, make it legally binding and permanent. Who would manage this trust? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Well, Dad has experience with financial planning through his accounting background. I've got the business education and the organizational skills. Carmen knows real estate. Between the 3 of us, we could make sure the money is handled properly while still giving you everything you need. Everything I need. Not everything I want, not everything I decide, but everything they determine I need. They were offering to be my financial guardians, to protect me from myself, to ensure that the irresponsible Marcus they'd always known wouldn't waste this miraculous windfall. I appreciate the concern, Sofia, but I think I'm going to handle this differently. Differently how, Marcus? This isn't a time to be stubborn. This isn't about pride or independence. This is about reality. You've never managed this kind of money before. None of us have, but at least we're willing to get professional help and make decisions as a team. Never managed this kind of money before. I looked around my home office, at the filing cabinets full of property deeds, loan documents, tax returns, and investment statements. At the desktop computer where I tracked rental income, property appreciation, and market trends. At the bookshelf filled with real estate investment guides, tax planning manuals, and business development resources. What if I told you I have been managing money successfully for years? Marcus, what are you talking about? You've been living paycheck to paycheck. You've been in that tiny apartment, driving that old truck, working construction jobs. When have you been managing money? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with years of assumptions, dismissals, and underestimations. This was the moment where I could continue the charade or start revealing the truth, where I could keep accepting their narrative about my limitations or begin showing them who I actually was. Sofia, there are some things about my financial situation that might surprise you. What kind of things? I stood up and walked to my floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the Phoenix skyline. Somewhere down there was the apartment they thought I lived in, the small space with secondhand furniture and cheap appliances that represented their understanding of my life. Up here was the reality they'd never imagined possible. The kind of things that might change your opinion about whether I need help managing money. Marcus, you're scaring me. What are you not telling us? What I wasn't telling them would shatter every assumption they'd built about me over the past 3 years. What I wasn't telling them would force them to confront the possibility that the family member they'd been trying to help was actually more financially successful than any of them. What I wasn't telling them would reveal that their concern and advice came from a place of ignorance, not wisdom. Maybe we should have this conversation in person. Yes, absolutely. Can you come over tomorrow? Everyone will be here for Sunday dinner anyway. Sunday dinner, the weekly gathering where they updated each other on their lives, their achievements, their plans, while I sat quietly and listened, contributing nothing because they'd never believed I had anything valuable to contribute, where they discussed their small victories and modest goals, while I kept silent about successes that dwarfed their accomplishments. I'll be there, but Sofia, I think tomorrow's dinner is going to be different than usual. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my penthouse, planning what I was going to say and show them. The lottery win had forced this conversation, but the real revelation was going to be about everything that had happened before the lottery, about the 3 years of building wealth while they thought I was failing, about the investment decisions they'd never known I was capable of making, about the financial literacy they'd never given me credit for developing. I opened my laptop and started preparing property deeds, investment statements, tax returns, and bank records. 3 years of documentation that would prove I'd been living a completely different life than the one they'd imagined for me for 3 years. 3 years of evidence that their assumptions about my capabilities were not just wrong, but laughably wrong. The most difficult part was going to be explaining why I'd hidden it from them for so long, why I'd let them believe I was struggling when I was actually thriving, why I'd accepted their pity and charity when I could have bought and sold their lives several times. But maybe that was exactly the conversation we needed to have. Maybe it was time for them to understand that their low expectations had become a cage, and that I'd been living outside that cage.
Cage for years without them noticing? My phone buzzed with a text from Jake Sullivan. Marcus, saw you on the news tonight. Looked good in that suit. You finally gonna tell your family the truth about everything else? Everything else? The real estate portfolio, the investment income, the business partnerships, the financial independence I'd achieved while they thought I was barely surviving. The life I'd built in secret because their version of helping had always felt more like controlling. I typed back, "Tomorrow night. Sunday dinner is going to be interesting." "About time," Jake replied. "They're going to lose their minds when they find out their charity case has been richer than all of them for 3 years." Richer than all of them. It was true, and it was about to become impossible to deny. The lottery win was just the exclamation point on a financial success story that had been unfolding in secret while they worried about my rent money and offered to buy me groceries. I spent the rest of the evening organizing documents, printing statements, and preparing for a conversation that would either strengthen my family relationships or destroy them completely. Because once they learned the truth about how wrong they'd been, about how their help hadn't been helping, about how their assumptions had been insulting, there would be no going back to the dynamic we'd maintained for 28 years. The construction worker who needed their guidance was about to disappear forever. In his place would be someone they'd never met before, Marcus Rivera, real estate investor, business owner, and self-made millionaire who'd been quietly succeeding while they loudly worried about his future. Sunday dinner was going to be unforgettable. The final confrontation. Sunday afternoon in Phoenix carried the dry heat that made everything shimmer like a mirage. I sat in my Tesla Model S in the driveway of my parents' modest ranch-style home in central Phoenix, the same house where I'd grown up hearing about my limitations and lack of direction, the same kitchen table where they'd dismissed my college dreams and business ideas, the same living room where they'd spent 3 years worrying about my financial stability while I secretly built an empire they couldn't imagine. Today, that would all change. I'd loaded my briefcase with 3 years of financial documentation. Property deeds, investment statements, business partnership agreements, tax returns showing income levels that exceeded their combined family earnings, the evidence of a completely different life than the one they'd assumed I was living. My phone showed 17 missed calls from family members since yesterday's news appearance. Sofia had texted 3 times asking if I was still coming to dinner. Mom had left a voice note saying she'd made my favorite enchiladas. Dad had sent a message about arriving early so we could discuss some important matters privately. They were all preparing for the same conversation: how to help poor, overwhelmed Marcus handle his sudden windfall responsibly, how to protect him from making the kinds of mistakes that destroy lottery winners, how to ensure that the family screw-up didn't waste this miraculous opportunity. What they weren't preparing for was learning that the family screw-up had been quietly outperforming their wildest financial dreams for 3 years running.
I walked up the familiar sidewalk, carrying my briefcase and wearing the same casual clothes I always wore to family dinners. Jeans, work boots, button-down shirt. The costume of the role I'd been playing, one last time. The front door opened before I could knock. Sofia stood there, her expression mixing relief with concern. "Marcus, thank God you're here. We were starting to worry you might not show up." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, stepping into the house that smelled like green chilies and family history. The living room was fuller than usual. Not just the immediate family, but Aunt Carmen and Uncle Miguel, plus my cousin David, who'd driven down from Flagstaff specifically for this gathering. Everyone had cleared their schedules to be here for the emergency Marcus intervention disguised as Sunday dinner. "There he is," Dad said, standing up from his recliner with the kind of serious expression he wore when he was about to deliver important life advice. "The lottery winner himself." Uncle Miguel laughed and slapped my back. "Marcus, you son of a gun, you really did it! $47 million. I still can't believe it." "Believe it," I said, setting my briefcase down by the front door, "because that's just the beginning of what you're going to have trouble believing today." The room went quiet. Sofia glanced at Mom, who was bustling around the kitchen putting final touches on dinner. Aunt Carmen looked up from her phone where she had been scrolling through real estate listings. David raised an eyebrow, the first hint that someone might be picking up on the subtext of my comment. "What do you mean, the beginning?" Dad asked. I looked around the room at the faces of people who'd shaped my understanding of myself for 28 years. People who'd loved me while simultaneously limiting me, who'd supported me while consistently underestimating me, who'd tried to help me while never actually understanding who I was or what I was capable of. I mean that the lottery win is just the most recent development in a financial story that's been going on for 3 years. A story none of you know about because none of you ever asked the right questions. Sofia stepped closer, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "Marcus, what kind of story are you talking about?" "The kind where the family member you've been worried about has actually been more financially successful than any of you imagined possible for 3 years." The silence that followed was different from normal family dinner quiet. This was the silence of people trying to process information that didn't fit their existing framework of understanding. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Mijo, what are you saying?" I walked to my briefcase and opened it, pulling out a folder thick with documents. Property deeds, investment statements, business partnership agreements, tax returns showing income levels that exceeded their combined family earnings, the evidence of a completely different life than the one they'd assumed I was living. Uncle Miguel laughed, but it sounded forced. "Marcus, what are you talking about? You live in that tiny apartment on 27th Avenue. You drive a 15-year-old pickup truck." "I maintain a tiny apartment on 27th Avenue because that's what you expect to see. I drive a 15-year-old pickup truck to work because that fits the image you have of who I am. But Uncle Miguel, what I actually drive when I'm not performing for your benefit is quite different." I pulled out a photograph from my folder. My Tesla Model S parked in front of my Scottsdale penthouse, the city lights sparkling behind it. I handed it.
Uncle Miguel and watched his face change as he processed what he was looking at. "This is my actual car, parked at my actual home, a penthouse I purchased with cash 2 years ago." The photograph passed from hand to hand, each family member staring at it like it was written in a foreign language. Sofia was the first to find her voice. "Marcus, I don't understand. How is this possible? We've seen where you live. We've helped you with expenses. You've seen where you think I live, because I've maintained that apartment specifically for family visits. And Sofia, you've never helped me with expenses. You've offered to help me with expenses that I never actually needed help with." I pulled out another document, my property deed for the Scottsdale penthouse. "This is the deed to my primary residence, purchased in March 2022 for $1.8 million. Cash purchase, no mortgage." Dad took the deed from Sofia's trembling hands, adjusting his reading glasses to examine the official paperwork. "Son, this says you bought this property 2 years ago. How did you have $1.8 million 2 years ago?" The same way I've had money for every major purchase I've made since 2021. Real estate investment and development partnerships that have generated more income than your accounting firm makes in a year. The room erupted, not with celebration or congratulations, but with confusion and what sounded almost like accusations. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mom's voice was hurt, bewildered. "How long has this been going on?" Sofia demanded. "What else haven't you told us?" Aunt Carmen added. I held up my hand for quiet, then pulled out my laptop from the briefcase. Instead of trying to explain everything at once, let me show you.
Research. The one Uncle Miguel said was interesting but not practical. I opened to the final page, where I had projected my net worth goals for 2024. According to this plan, I projected having between $3 and $4 million in assets by 2024. I exceeded my own projections by almost $1 million. Dad took the business plan and read through it slowly, his accountant's eye catching details and projections that must have looked very different now than they had 3 years ago. "Son, this is actually quite sophisticated. These market analyses are thorough. The financial projections are conservative and realistic." "I know, Dad. I wrote it." "But why didn't you insist that we take it seriously?" "Because I was 25 years old, and you'd spent my entire life teaching me that my judgment wasn't trustworthy. Because every time I tried to share ambitious goals, you'd explained why they weren't realistic for someone like me. Because it was easier to prove you wrong quietly than to keep fighting for your approval." Sofia closed my laptop and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. We all do. We've been treating you like someone who needed our protection when you've actually been more successful than any of us. The lottery win just makes it impossible to hide anymore," I said. "But, Sofia, I need you to understand something. When you called this week talking about setting up a family trust to protect me from making bad financial decisions, I was sitting in a home office surrounded by documentation of 3 years of excellent financial decisions." "Oh, God," she whispered. "We must have sounded so condescending." "You sounded like people who love me but don't know me. People who want to help but have never understood what I actually need or what I'm actually capable of." Mom stood up and walked over to me, taking my hands in hers. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry we didn't see how capable you are. I'm sorry we made you feel like you had to hide your success from us." "Mom, I'm not angry about the past, but I need things to be different going forward. I need you to trust that I can make my own decisions, even when those decisions don't match what you think is best for me." Dad joined Mom, extending his hand for a handshake that felt more like a peace treaty. "Son, I was wrong about your business plan. I was wrong about your capabilities. I was wrong about a lot of things." "We all were," Uncle Miguel added. "Marcus, that business opportunity I mentioned this week about expanding the auto shop, I think I should be asking you for investment advice, not the other way around." The irony wasn't lost on me. A week ago, they'd been planning to protect me from bad investments. Today, they were asking for my investment guidance. The shift was dramatic enough to give me whiplash. But the conversation that followed was different from any family discussion we'd ever had. Instead of them giving me advice, they asked questions about my investment strategies. Instead of dismissing my ideas, they wanted to understand my thought processes. Instead of treating me like the family member who needed help, they started treating me like the family member who might be able to help them. Aunt Carmen asked about my property selection criteria. Sofia wanted to understand my market analysis methods. Dad asked detailed questions about my partnership agreements and profit-sharing structures. Uncle Miguel listened intently as I explained how I'd learned to identify undervalued commercial properties. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like they were seeing me clearly, not as the version of Marcus they'd constructed in their minds, but as the person I'd actually become when they weren't watching. Dinner was completely different, too. Instead of everyone updating each other on their modest accomplishments while I listened quietly, I found myself sharing stories about business deals, property renovations, investment partnerships, stories I'd been keeping to myself for 3 years because I'd never believed they'd be interested or impressed. Marcus, Mom said as we finished eating, I have to ask, when we offered to help you with money over the years, how did that feel? I considered her question carefully. It felt like love, but also like you didn't see me clearly. Like you were trying to help someone who didn't exist. The person we thought you were, Dad said quietly. The person you needed me to be so you could feel good about helping me, I corrected gently. But Mom, I need you to know that I never actually needed the help you offered. What I needed was for you to believe I could succeed without your help. Sofia nodded slowly. We robbed you of the chance to share your successes with us because we were so focused on protecting you from failure. And I robbed myself of family support during the stressful parts of building a business because I was afraid you'd try to talk me out of taking risks. Sunday afternoon in Phoenix carried the dry heat that made everything shimmer like a mirage. I sat in my Tesla Model S in the driveway of my parents' modest ranch-style home in central Phoenix, the same house where I'd grown up hearing about my limitations and lack of direction, the same kitchen table where they'd dismissed my college dreams and business ideas, the same living room where they'd spent 3 years worrying about my financial stability while I secretly built an empire they couldn't imagine. Today, that would all change. I'd loaded my briefcase with 3 years of financial documentation, property deeds, investment statements, business partnership agreements, tax returns showing income levels that exceeded their combined family earnings. The evidence of a completely different life than the one they'd assumed I was living. My phone showed 17 missed calls from family members since yesterday's news appearance. Sofia had texted 3 times asking if I was still coming to dinner. Mom had left a voice note saying she'd made my favorite enchiladas. Dad had sent a message about arriving early so we could discuss some important matters privately. They were all preparing for the same conversation: how to help poor, overwhelmed Marcus handle his sudden windfall responsibly, how to protect him from making the kinds of mistakes that destroy lottery winners, how to ensure that the family screw-up didn't waste this miraculous opportunity. What they weren't preparing for was learning that the family screw-up had been quietly outperforming their wildest financial dreams for 3 years running. I walked up the familiar sidewalk, carrying my briefcase and wearing the same casual clothes I always wore to family dinners. Jeans, work boots, button-down shirt. The costume of the role I'd been playing, one last time. The front door opened before I could knock. Sofia stood there, her expression mixing relief with concern. Marcus, thank God you're here. We were starting to worry.
Might not show up. Wouldn't miss it, I said, stepping into the house that smelled like green chilies and family history. The living room was fuller than usual. Not just the immediate family, but Aunt Carmen and Uncle Miguel, plus my cousin David, who'd driven down from Flagstaff specifically for this gathering. Everyone had cleared their schedules to be here for the emergency Marcus intervention disguised as Sunday dinner. There he is, Dad said, standing up from his recliner with the kind of serious expression he wore when he was about to deliver important life advice. The lottery winner himself. Uncle Miguel laughed and slapped my back. Marcus, you son of a gun, you really did it. $47 million. I still can't believe it. Believe it, I said, setting my briefcase down by the front door, because that's just the beginning of what you're going to have trouble believing today. The room went quiet. Sofia glanced at Mom, who was bustling around the kitchen putting final touches on dinner. Aunt Carmen looked up from her phone, where she'd been scrolling through real estate listings. David raised an eyebrow, the first hint that someone might be picking up on the subtext of my comment. What do you mean, the beginning? Dad asked. I looked around the room at the faces of people who'd shaped my understanding of myself for 28 years, people who'd loved me while simultaneously limiting me, who'd supported me while consistently underestimating me, who'd tried to help me while never actually understanding who I was or what I was capable of. I mean that the lottery win is just the most recent development in a financial story that's been going on for 3 years. A story none of you know about because none of you ever asked the right questions. Sofia stepped closer, her lawyer instincts kicking in. Marcus, what kind of story are you talking about? The kind where the family member you've been worried about has actually been more financially successful than any of you imagined possible. The silence that followed was different from normal family dinner quiet.
This was the silence of people trying to process information that didn't fit their existing framework of understanding. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Mijo, what are you saying?" I walked to my briefcase and opened it, pulling out a folder thick with documents. "I'm saying that while you've all been concerned about my ability to handle $47 million, I've already been successfully managing several $1,000,000 for 3 years." Uncle Miguel laughed, but it sounded forced. "Marcus, what are you talking about? You live in that tiny apartment on 27th Avenue. You drive a 15-year-old pickup truck." "I maintain a tiny apartment on 27th Avenue because that's what you expect to see. I drive a 15-year-old pickup truck to work because that fits the image you have of who I am. But Uncle Miguel, what I actually drive when I'm not performing for your benefit is quite different." I pulled out a photograph from my folder. My Tesla Model S parked in front of my Scottsdale penthouse, the city lights sparkling behind it. I handed it to Uncle Miguel and watched his face change as he processed what he was looking at. "This is my actual car, parked at my actual home, a penthouse I purchased with cash 2 years ago." The photograph passed from hand to hand, each family member staring at it like it was written in a foreign language. Sofia was the first to find her voice. "Marcus, I don't understand. How is this possible? We've seen where you live. We've helped you with expenses." "You've seen where you think I live because I've maintained that apartment specifically for family visits. And Sofia, you've never helped me with expenses. You've offered to help me with expenses that I never actually needed help with." I pulled out another document, my property deed to the Scottsdale penthouse. "This is the deed to my primary residence, purchased in March 2022 for $1.8 million. Cash purchase, no mortgage." Dad took the deed from Sofia's trembling hands, adjusting his reading glasses to examine the official paperwork. "Son, this says you bought this property 2 years ago. How did you have $1.8 million 2 years ago?" "The same way I've had money for every major purchase I've made since 2021. Real estate investment and development partnerships that have generated more income than your accounting firm makes in a year." The room erupted, not with celebration or congratulations, but with confusion and what sounded almost like accusations. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mom's voice was hurt, bewildered. "How long has this been going on?" Sofia demanded. "What else haven't you told us?" Aunt Carmen added. I held up my hand for quiet and then pulled out my laptop from the briefcase. "Instead of trying to explain everything at once, let me show you." I opened my financial tracking spreadsheet, the one I'd been maintaining religiously for 3 years. Property acquisitions, renovation costs, sale prices, rental income, partnership distributions, investment returns. 3 years of financial activity that painted a picture of steady, strategic wealth building. In 2021, I used savings from construction work to purchase my first investment property, a duplex in Tempe, for $85,000. I renovated it myself, working nights and weekends, then sold it 6 months later for $230,000. I scrolled to the next entry. I used that profit to purchase 2 more properties, renovated them both, and sold one while keeping the other as a rental. By the end of 2021, I had $400,000 in liquid assets and 1 rental property generating $1,200 monthly. The numbers continued. 2022 brought more properties, higher value deals, partnerships with developers who needed someone with renovation skills and investment capital. 2023 expanded into commercial real estate, small business investments, and a consulting arrangement with a property development firm. As of last week, before the lottery win, my total net worth was just over $4.2 million. The lottery isn't making me rich, it's making me richer. Dad set down the spreadsheet printout he'd been studying and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not disappointment or concern or patronizing advice, but something approaching awe mixed with confusion. "Marcus, how did you learn to do all this? You never went to business school. You don't have a finance background." "I learned the same way millions of people learn things these days. Books, online courses, mentorship from people already doing what I wanted to do." Jake Sullivan introduced me to his contacts in real estate development. I studied market trends, analyzed property values, learned construction skills that gave me advantages
Investors didn't have. Sofia was scrolling through bank statements on my laptop, her expression shifting from skepticism to amazement. Marcus, these rental income deposits are more than I make in my marketing job. I know. The property appreciation on some of these investments is incredible. You've consistently beaten market averages. I know. Why? Her voice cracked slightly. Why didn't you tell us you were successful? Why did you let us think you were struggling? That was the question I'd been dreading and preparing for simultaneously. The question that cut to the heart of 3 years of family dynamics and a lifetime of feeling underestimated. Because every time I tried to talk about my goals or my plans, you shut me down. When I mentioned wanting to start a contracting business, Uncle Miguel laughed and said I didn't have business sense. When I talked about learning about investments, you patted my head and said that was above my pay grade. When I suggested going back to college, Dad told me I barely made it through community college the first time. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence carried weight. Memory. Recognition of conversations they'd forgotten but I'd carried with me for years. So I stopped talking about my plans and started executing them quietly. I kept the apartment you expected me to have and drove the truck you expected me to drive because it was easier than constantly defending my choices or proving my competence. Mom sat down heavily on the couch, her hand over her heart. Mijo, we didn't mean to discourage you. We were trying to protect you from disappointment. I know, Mom, but your protection felt like limitation. Your concern felt like you didn't believe in me. Your advice felt like you thought I wasn't smart enough or capable enough to make my own decisions. Uncle Miguel cleared his throat. Marcus, if we'd known you were this successful, things would have been different. Would they? Because I told you 3 years ago that I wanted to invest in real estate, and you said it was too risky for someone like me. I told you I was interested in property development, and you said I should focus on having a steady job with benefits. At what point would you have started taking me seriously? Aunt Carmen was looking through photographs of my various properties, shaking her head. Marcus, this portfolio is worth millions of dollars. You own commercial buildings. You have business partnerships with major developers. Why are you still working construction? Because I like construction work. Because it keeps me connected to the renovation skills that give me investment advantages. Because not every decision has to be about maximizing status or impressing other people. I pulled out one final document, the one I'd been saving for last, a business plan I'd written in 2021, detailed projections for a construction and property development company, 5-year goals, market analysis, financial forecasting. The same business plan I'd tried to share with them 3 years ago, before they'd convinced me it was unrealistic. This is the business plan I tried to show you in 2021, the one Dad said was too ambitious, the one Sofia said needed more research, the one Uncle Miguel said was interesting but not practical. I opened to the final page where I'd projected my net worth goals for 2024. According to this plan, I projected having between $3 and $4 million in assets by 2024. I exceeded my own projections by almost $1 million. Dad took the business plan and read through it slowly, his accountant's eye catching details and projections that must have looked very different now than they had 3 years ago. Son, this is actually quite sophisticated. These market analyses are thorough. The financial projections are conservative and realistic. I know, Dad. I wrote it. But why didn't you insist that we take it seriously? Because I was 25 years old and you'd spent my entire life teaching me that my judgment wasn't trustworthy. Because every time I tried to share ambitious goals, you'd explain why they weren't realistic for someone like me. Because it was easier to prove you wrong quietly than to keep fighting for your approval. Sofia closed my laptop and looked at me with tears in her eyes. Marcus, I owe you an apology. We all do. We've been treating you like someone who needed our protection when you've actually been more successful than any of us. The lottery win just makes it impossible to hide anymore, I said. But Sofia, I need you to understand something. When you called this week talking about setting up a family trust to protect me from making bad financial decisions, I was sitting in a home office surrounded by documentation of 3 years of excellent financial decisions. "Oh, God," she whispered, "we must have sounded so condescending. You sounded like people who love me but don't know me, people who want to help but have never understood what I actually need or what I'm actually capable of." Mom stood up and walked over to me, taking my hands in hers. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry we didn't see how capable you are. I'm sorry we made you feel like you had to hide your success from us." "Mom, I'm not angry about the past, but I need things to be different going forward. I need you to trust that I can make my own decisions, even when those decisions don't match what you think is best for me." Dad joined Mom, extending his hand for a handshake that felt more like a peace treaty. "Son, I was wrong about your business plan. I was wrong about your capabilities. I was wrong about a lot of things." "We all were," Uncle Miguel added. "Marcus, that business opportunity I mentioned this week about expanding the auto shop, I think I should be asking you for investment advice, not the other way around." The irony wasn't lost on me. A week ago, they'd been planning to protect me from bad investments. Today, they were asking for my investment guidance. The shift was dramatic enough to give me whiplash. But the conversation that followed was different than any family discussion we'd ever had. Instead of them giving me advice, they asked questions about my investment strategies. Instead of dismissing my ideas, they wanted to understand my thought processes. Instead of treating me like the family member who needed help, they started treating me like the family member who might be able to help them. Aunt Carmen asked about my property selection criteria. Sofia wanted to understand my market analysis methods. Dad asked detailed questions about my partnership agreements and profit-sharing structures. Uncle Miguel listened intently as I explained how I'd learned to identify undervalued commercial properties. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like they were seeing me clearly. Not as the version of Marcus they'd constructed in their minds, but the person I had actually become when they weren't watching.
Different, too. Instead of everyone updating each other on their modest accomplishments while I listened quietly, I found myself sharing stories about business deals, property renovations, investment partnerships, stories I'd been keeping to myself for 3 years because I'd never believed they'd be interested or impressed. "Marcus," Mom said as we finished eating, "I have to ask, when we offered to help you with money over the years, how did that feel?" I considered her question carefully. "It felt like love, but also like you didn't see me clearly, like you were trying to help someone who didn't exist." "The person we thought you were," Dad said quietly. "The person you needed me to be so you could feel good about helping me," I corrected gently. "But Mom, I need you to know that I never actually needed the help you offered. What I needed was for you to believe I could succeed without your help." Sofia nodded slowly. "We robbed you of the chance to share your successes with us because we were so focused on protecting you from failure. And I robbed myself of family support during the stressful parts of building a business because I was afraid you'd try to talk me out of taking risks." The conversation continued late into the evening, but it wasn't the intervention they'd planned. Instead, it became the first honest discussion we'd had about money, success, and family expectations in years, maybe ever. Around 9 o'clock, as the initial shock was wearing off, Uncle Miguel brought up the elephant in the room that everyone had been thinking about, but no one had voiced. "Marcus, I have to ask about something that's been bothering me. All those times we offered to help with money, all those times we worried about your bills, all those times we treated you like you were struggling financially. Were you laughing at us?" The question hung heavy in the desert air that drifted through Mom's open kitchen window. It was the question that could either heal our relationships or destroy them permanently, depending on how I answered. "No, Uncle Miguel, I was never laughing at you, but I was hurt by you." "Hurt how?" "Hurt that you assumed I was failing without ever asking if I was actually failing. Hurt that you offered help without ever checking if I needed help. hurt that you made decisions about my competence based on what car I drove instead of what goals I was achieving." Aunt Carmen leaned forward in her chair. "But Marcus, if you didn't need our help, why didn't you just tell us that?" "Because every time I tried to tell you about my successes, you found ways to minimize them or redirect the conversation. When I mentioned making money on that first duplex sale, Dad said real estate was too volatile for someone like me. When I talked about my rental income, Sofia said I should focus on getting a job with benefits instead of relying on unpredictable sources." I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo I'd taken last year of a check I'd received from a property sale. $240,000 profit from a 6-month renovation project. This check came the same week that Aunt Carmen offered to lend me money for car repairs. I didn't need money for car repairs. I could have bought 10 cars with cash. But I accepted your offer because I didn't know how to tell you the truth without making you feel foolish for assuming I was broke. The silence that followed was different from the earlier silences. This one carried the weight of recognition, of people realizing that their good intentions had created a gulf between us that neither side knew how to bridge. Mom broke the silence first. "Marcus, I think I understand why you felt like you couldn't tell us. We weren't listening to you as an adult. We were still treating you like the 22-year-old who dropped out of college. And I was still acting like the 22-year-old who needed your approval, instead of standing up for myself and insisting that you see me differently." Dad cleared his throat. "Son, there's something else we need to address. This family trust that Sofia mentioned, obviously, that conversation needs to happen very differently now." "Actually, Dad, I've been thinking about that. Maybe a family trust isn't such a bad idea. Just not for the reasons you originally suggested." Sofia looked confused. "What do you mean?" I opened my laptop again and pulled up a document I'd been working on since Wednesday. "I mean that $47 million is enough money to change everyone's life in this room, not just mine. But instead of you managing my money to protect me from myself, maybe we could structure something where I use this windfall to create opportunities for all of us." I turned the laptop screen toward them, showing a preliminary plan I drafted. College fund for Diego's graduate school, fully funded. Expansion capital for Uncle Miguel's auto shop if he wants to take it to the next level. Seed money for Aunt Carmen to start her own real estate brokerage instead of working for someone else. Mom and Dad, enough to retire comfortably if that's what you want, or to travel, or to start that consulting business you've talked about, Dad. The room went completely quiet as they absorbed what I was proposing. "But here's the difference," I continued. "This isn't me giving you charity or you managing my money. This is me investing in family members who I believe can succeed, the same way I've been investing in real estate projects and business partnerships for 3 years." Diego, who'd been mostly quiet throughout the evening, finally spoke up. "Marcus, are you serious about the graduate school funding?" "Completely serious. But Diego, I'm not just going to hand you money. I want to see your degree plan, your career goals, your budget projections. I want to invest in your success, not just pay your bills." Uncle Miguel was staring at the laptop screen, calculating numbers. "Marcus, this amount would let me open 3 new locations and hire the staff I've been wanting to bring on for years. Then let's talk about your business plan. Show me your market research, your location analysis, your financial projections. Convince me it's a smart investment, not just a family favor." Sofia laughed, but it was a different kind of laugh than I had heard from her before. "Marcus, you're turning the tables on us completely. You're making us prove we're worth investing in." "Because that's how real investment works. And because I think you'll all be more successful if you're accountable for results, instead of just grateful for gifts." Aunt Carmen was already taking notes. "Marcus, I've had a business plan for my own brokerage sitting in my desk drawer for 2 years. I just never had the capital to make it happen." "Then dust it off and show it to me. If the numbers work and the strategy makes sense, let's make it happen." What followed was the most productive family meeting we had ever had, not because we were planning how to protect me from my money, but because we were planning how to invest in family members who I believe can succeed.
Use my money to create more success for everyone. Dad wanted to understand my investment criteria. Mom asked about my decision-making process for choosing business partners. Sofia started talking about marketing strategies for Aunt Carmen's potential brokerage. Uncle Miguel and Diego began discussing internship possibilities at the expanded auto shop. For the first time in years, we were talking to each other instead of about each other. For the first time ever, they were asking for my advice instead of giving me advice I didn't need. But the most powerful moment came when Mom pulled me aside as the evening was winding down. "Marcus, I need to apologize for something specific. 3 years ago, when you tried to show us that business plan, I didn't even read it carefully. I just saw my young son with big dreams, and I was afraid he was going to get hurt. Mom, you were trying to protect me." "No, mijo, I was trying to protect myself. I was afraid that if you failed at something big, I would feel responsible for not stopping you. So I stopped you before you could try, and I told myself it was for your own good." Her honesty hit me harder than any of the earlier revelations. "Mom, what you're describing is exactly why I stopped sharing my plans with the family. I could feel that you were more afraid of my failure than excited about my potential success. And now I see that I taught you to hide your successes from the people who should have been celebrating them with you." We stood together in her kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of a dinner that had changed everything between us. The enchiladas she'd made because she thought I needed comfort food after the overwhelming experience of winning the lottery. The family gathering she'd organized because she thought I needed guidance managing sudden wealth. All of it based on assumptions that had been completely wrong. "Mom, can I ask you something? What would you have done differently if you'd known 3 years ago that I was already successful?" She thought about it for a long moment. "I would have asked you more questions instead of giving you so many answers. I would have been curious about your methods instead of worried about your choices. I would have bragged about your accomplishments instead of worrying about your future. That's all I ever wanted, not your money or your solutions, just your recognition that I was capable of creating my own solutions." As the family began gathering their things to leave, the dynamic had shifted completely from where it started. They'd arrived planning to help me manage my lottery winnings responsibly. They were leaving with business plans to research, investment proposals to develop, and a completely different understanding of who Marcus Rivera actually was. Sofia hugged me goodbye with tears in her eyes. "Marcus, I'm so proud of everything you've built, and I'm sorry it took a lottery win for us to finally see it." "Sofia, the lottery win just forced the conversation we should have been having for 3 years. But now we can have all the conversations we missed." Uncle Miguel shook my hand with the kind of respect he'd never shown me before. "Marcus, I want you to know that your success changes how I see a lot of things. About business, about taking risks, about believing in people even when their methods are different from what you'd choose. Uncle Miguel, your auto shop has been successful for 15 years. You know how to build and run a business. The only difference is that I've been doing it quietly while you've been doing it openly." Dad was the last to leave, and his goodbye was the most meaningful of all. "Son, I realize now that I spent so much time trying to teach you about financial responsibility that I never noticed you'd already learned it. I'm proud of the man you've become, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see who that man actually was." After everyone left, I sat with Mom in her living room, both of us processing the evening that had changed our family forever. "Mijo, what happens now?" "Now we figure out how to be a family where everyone's success is celebrated instead of questioned, where everyone's dreams are supported instead of limited, where we ask each other, 'How can I help?' instead of assuming we know what kind of help is needed." She nodded, smiling for the first time all evening. "And now I finally get to brag about my son, the successful businessman, instead of worrying about my son, the struggling construction worker. Mom, I'm still going to be a construction worker. That part wasn't fake.
I just happen to be a construction worker who also owns several $1 million worth of real estate. That's going to take some getting used to. For all of us. I drove home that night in my Tesla, taking the route that passed by my old apartment on 27th Avenue, the place I'd maintained for 3 years as a stage prop, a visual representation of the life my family expected me to be living. Tomorrow, I'd give notice on that lease. The performance was over. But as I pulled into the underground garage of my Scottsdale penthouse, I realized that the end of the performance didn't mean the end of the relationships. If anything, tonight had shown me that my family was capable of growth, of changing their assumptions, of seeing me differently when presented with evidence that their old assumptions were completely wrong. The lottery win had forced a conversation that needed to happen. But the real prize wasn't the $47 million. The real prize was finally being known and accepted by the people whose opinions had mattered to me most, even when those opinions had been completely wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake Sullivan. "How did Sunday dinner go?" I typed back, "Better than expected. Turns out my family is capable of learning. About time they figured out who you really are. About time I stopped hiding who I really am." As I settled into my home office, surrounded by the evidence of 3 years of hidden success, I realized that the most important lesson wasn't about money or real estate or business development. It was about the courage to be seen, to be known, to insist that people see you clearly, even when clarity is uncomfortable for everyone involved. Tomorrow, I'd start working with my family members on their business plans and investment strategies. Tomorrow, we'd begin building something together instead of talking past each other. Tomorrow, I'd finally get to share my successes instead of hiding them. But tonight, I was simply grateful that the lottery had given me something more valuable than money. It had given me the chance to stop pretending to be someone I wasn't and start being appreciated for someone I actually was. The family disappointment was gone forever, replaced by someone they'd never expected to meet, Marcus Rivera, the success story that had been hiding in plain sight for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to step into the light. That moment had finally come, and it had been worth way more than money.
The Wait. The Phoenix Business Journal headline read, "Rivera Family Enterprises, From Lottery Win to Investment Empire." I set the newspaper down on my new office desk, a mahogany piece that occupied the corner suite of the building I'd purchased 6 months ago to house our family's expanding business ventures. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the construction crews working on Uncle Miguel's third auto shop location. The sound of hammering and machinery carried up 18 floors, a rhythm I'd grown to love over the past year as our family investments had transformed from ambitious plans into concrete reality. My assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Rivera, your 11 o'clock is here. Sofia and the marketing team for Carmen's brokerage expansion." "Send them in." Sofia walked through the door carrying a presentation folder and wearing the confident smile of someone who'd found her true calling. Behind her came Aunt Carmen and 2 marketing specialists they'd hired to launch the television advertising campaign for Carmen Rivera Realty. "Marcus, you need to see these numbers," Sofia said, spreading charts across my conference table. "Carmen's brokerage did $4.2 million in sales volume last month. We're ahead of our first-year projections by 30%. Aunt Carmen beamed with pride. "Marcus, I cannot thank you enough for believing in my business plan when I didn't even believe in it myself. Carmen, you did the work. I just provided the capital. Your market knowledge and client relationships made this happen." But that wasn't entirely true, and we all knew it. The success had been a combination of Carmen's 15 years of real estate experience, Sofia's marketing brilliance, and my investment in both the business and in treating them like capable professionals rather than family members who needed protection. The dynamic had shifted completely. Where a year ago they'd been trying to manage my money, now I was helping them manage their rapidly growing businesses. Where they'd once worried about my decision-making, now they sought my input on their strategic choices. Sofia pulled up a presentation on my wall-mounted monitor. "Marcus, we want to run this by you. Carmen's ready to expand into commercial real estate, and we think there's synergy with your development projects." I studied the market analysis they'd prepared, impressed by the depth of research and strategic thinking. "Sofia, this is sophisticated work. Have you considered that you might be wasted in traditional marketing? This looks more like business consulting."
Actually, that's something I wanted to discuss with you. I've been thinking about starting my own consulting firm specializing in helping family businesses scale their operations. With clients beyond just our family enterprises? Exactly. There's dozens of family owned businesses in Phoenix that could benefit from the kind of strategic planning and marketing integration we've developed here. I leaned back in my chair, considering the implications. A year ago, Sofia had been worried about my ability to handle sudden wealth. Now, she was proposing to build her own consulting business based on lessons learned from managing our family's investment portfolio. Sofia, I think that's an excellent idea. Put together a business plan and let's discuss funding. After they left, I walked to the window overlooking downtown Phoenix. The city sprawled below me, full of opportunities and challenges, much like it had been a year ago when I'd sat in my truck outside the QuikTrip reading lottery numbers. But everything else had changed. My phone buzzed with a text from Diego. Marcus, defended my thesis this morning, passed with distinction. Job interviews start next week. Thank you for making this possible. Diego's graduate program had been fully funded, but more importantly, he'd thrived under the pressure of knowing that someone was investing in his success rather than just paying his bills. His engineering thesis had focused on sustainable construction materials, research that was already attracting attention from major developers. Another text, this one from Dad. Dad, finished the consulting proposal for the Henderson Group. They want to discuss a 6-month contract. Retirement will have to wait. Dad's accounting expertise had found new life in business consulting, helping other family-owned firms navigate growth and succession planning. At 62, instead of winding down his career, he was building a new one based on decades of experience and a fresh perspective on what family businesses could achieve. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Rivera, Jake Sullivan is here for your 2 o'clock. Jake walked in carrying blueprints and wearing the satisfied expression of a man whose latest project was ahead of schedule and under budget. Marcus, you need to see the progress on the Tempe development. We're going to be ready for grand opening 3 weeks early. Jake and I had formalized our business partnership 6 months ago, combining his construction management expertise with my investment capital and renovation skills. Our latest project was a mixed-use development that would house Diego's engineering firm, Sofia's consulting business, and 3 other small businesses we'd identified as growth opportunities. Jake, how is the tenant recruitment going? Better than expected. We've got a waiting list for the commercial spaces, and the residential units are already 60% pre-leased. I studied the blueprints, noting the sustainable features Diego had recommended and the marketing-friendly design elements Sofia had suggested. This project represents everything we've learned about combining family expertise with smart investment strategy. And it's just the beginning. Marcus, I've got 3 more sites identified if you're interested in expanding the portfolio. After Jake left, I spent an hour reviewing financial reports from our various ventures. Uncle Miguel's auto shops were generating steady profits while employing 42 people. Carmen's brokerage had become one of the fastest-growing firms in Phoenix. Sofia's consulting work was attracting clients from across the Southwest. Dad's business was booked solid for the next 6 months. The lottery win had been the catalyst, but the real success story was what happened after the money became available. Instead of the family intervention they'd planned to protect me from poor decisions, we'd created a family enterprise that leveraged everyone's strengths while covering each other's weaknesses. My phone rang. Mom's contact photo appeared on the screen. Mijo, are you busy? I have some news to share. Never too busy for you. Mom, what's the news? I enrolled in that business administration program at the community college. If everyone else in this family is going to be an entrepreneur, I want to understand what you're all talking about. I laughed, remembering how a year ago she was worried about my ability to handle sudden wealth.
Ability to handle sudden wealth. Mom, that's fantastic. What's your focus area? Nonprofit management. I've been thinking about starting a foundation to help other families navigate sudden financial changes. Lottery winners, inheritance recipients, people who get unexpected windfalls and don't know how to handle them. The irony was perfect. Mom wanted to help other families avoid the mistakes our family had made when we assumed I couldn't handle my lottery win. She wanted to teach families how to support each other's success instead of limiting it. Mom, that's brilliant. The foundation could offer financial literacy, family communication workshops, investment education. There's definitely a need for those services. Marcus, would you consider being on the board of directors? Your experience with managing sudden wealth could be valuable for other families. A year ago, she'd wanted to protect me from my own financial decisions. Now she was asking me to help other families make better financial decisions. The transformation was complete. I'd be honored to serve on the board, Mom. After we hung up, I walked out onto my office balcony, looking out over the city where our family had built something none of us could have imagined a year ago. Not just financial success, but a new way of relating to each other based on mutual respect and recognition of each other's capabilities. The lottery win had given us money, but the real prize had been the forced conversation about assumptions, expectations, and the courage to see each other clearly. The $47 million had been life-changing, but not for the reasons anyone had expected. My phone buzzed with a notification from my investment app. The real estate portfolio I'd built before the lottery win had appreciated another 12% this quarter. The construction and development partnerships were generating steady income. The family business ventures were exceeding projections. But the notification that mattered most was a text message in our family group chat, the same chat where I had announced my lottery win a year ago, the announcement that had changed everything. Diego had shared a photo of his engineering diploma with the caption, "Officially graduated. Next stop, changing the construction industry." Sofia responded with a champagne emoji and, "So proud of our family entrepreneur." Uncle McGill added, "McGill's Auto Shop number 4 coming soon, thanks to the best business partner a man could ask for." Aunt Carmen shared a photo of a sold sign with "Another successful closing, Carmen Rivera Realty, where family values meet professional excellence." Dad posted a picture of a handshake with potential clients and "just landed the biggest consulting contract of my career." Mom shared a photo of her college textbooks with "never too old to learn something new." But the message that meant the most came from all of them together, a coordinated response that showed how much our family dynamic had changed. "Thank you, Marcus, for showing us that believing in each other is the best investment any family can make." I typed back, "Thank you all for proving that families can grow, change, and succeed together when they choose to see each other clearly." As the sun set over Phoenix, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. A year ago, I'd been hiding my success to avoid their judgment. Today, I was sharing success to amplify their potential. The lottery ticket had been worth $47 million. The conversation it forced was worth something beyond price. The chance to build authentic relationships with the people that mattered most. Relationships based on truth instead of assumptions, respect instead of pity, and mutual support instead of one-sided charity. The construction worker who'd won the lottery was still a construction worker, just one who'd learned that being seen clearly by family was worth more than any jackpot. And the family who'd won their own lottery? The lottery of learning to believe in each other's potential instead of limiting it. In the end, we'd all won something bigger than money. We'd won the chance to build something together. And that was a jackpot that would keep paying dividends for generations. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. Sometimes it's proving that everyone can be right when they choose to see the best in each other instead of the worst. And sometimes, when you stop hiding who you are, you discover that the people who love you are capable of loving who you actually are, not just who they thought you needed to be. That discovery was worth every penny of $47 million, and every year of keeping secrets, and every moment of doubt about whether the truth would be worth the risk. It was worth everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.